rom-com?
Yeah, it's true romance.
Hello, I'm back. How was vacation? Oh, it was nice. Thank you all for asking. I drank, I danced, passed out on the beach, woke up with a really nasty sunburn, got the couve, that was fun. So yeah, it was a good time. But you know, as I was sitting on that sunny beach, watching the waves, there was a song stuck in my head. A song designed to entice a romantic and endearing feeling known only to those who have truly seen True Romance. I love this movie. A crime thriller centered around two starry-eyed lovers who steal a briefcase full of coke and have to sell it before all parties involved catch up. That's it. That's the plot. But god damn it, I will be a dog in a Chinese restaurant before I dare say that's all there is to this movie. The movie has almost a fairy tale aspect to it. Two peasants fall in love in a shady town, have to fight their way out of the town and try to make it to the kingdom, but accidentally leave breadcrumbs for the local gangs to follow. Once they get to the kingdom, they bring their debauchery along with them and end up on the authorities' radar. That then leads to a climactic clash involving all parties, with the couple barely escaping with their lives and fleeing to a faraway land to live out their days. Now, if your brain immediately went to, well, it sounds like Bonnie and Clyde, but with a happy ending, you'd be forgiven because that's sort of what it is, only the couple isn't trying to cause madness and mayhem, they're trying to avoid it. This movie appeals to me subjectively because it reminds me of how just a guy would write a love story. There's tons of action, crime, some of the good shit, while also allowing itself to be vulnerable, sweet, and intimate with its moments, never sacrificing that tenderness for pure testosterone. True Romance was the first script Quentin Tarantino had ever written, so if you're a peak artistic, edgy Kino consumer that thinks Tarantino is the peak of all cinema, this is sure to tickle your pickle. He leaves his mark all over the writing, from his long yet slice of life style of dialogue, his tradition of having over-the-top action, and, of course,
Sicilians were spawned by
This movie came out after Reservoir Dogs but before Pulp Fiction, which may have been part of the reason this movie bombed at the box office. Tarantino's new cool style of cinema really took off with Pulp Fiction, and Tony Scott wanted a slice. Tony Scott directed this movie instead of Tarantino, and his style of directing combined with Tarantino's script complements each other perfectly, transforming Tarantino's grounded take on this true love story into something resembling a fairy tale with Scott's romanticized style of filmmaking. Tony Scott's lighting choices and costume design really sells this, from the warm skies of Hollywood to the snowy, grimy streets of Detroit to the bright and vibrant colors our characters choose to wear. Tarantino originally intended the movie to have a non-linear narrative, much like Pulp Fiction. I'm honestly not sure how that viewing experience would be, but hey, if there's a fan cut out there, be sure to let me know in the comments below. Apparently Tarantino's mentality for doing this, not dissimilar to Pulp Fiction, is that it keeps the audience curious, allowing the movie to keep certain motivations ambiguous until the ending where it all comes together. The movie stars Christian Slater, Patricia Arquette, Dennis Hopper, Gary Oldman, Christopher Walken, Val Kilmer, Michael Rappaport, James Gandolfini, Chris Penn, Tom Sizemore, Saul Rubinek, Brad Pitt. Jesus Christmas, why were we blessed with this cast? Hell, even Samuel L. Jackson has a cameo in this film. A lot of these actors were unknowns at the time, but my god did the casting department rule big with this lineup. Oh, and apparently they were supposed to get Robert De Niro to play Blue Lou Boyle. Anybody else want to join this cast? Morgan Freeman, Kurt Russell, Matt Damon, anyone? So, where do I even begin with this movie? The characters, the Sicilian scene, Tarantino's alternate ending? There's so much meat to this movie. I'm like a bear seeing Leo in the woods and saying,
finally, some good fucking food.
I mean, I guess we should start with the characters. It's not like they're that interesting, right? Christian Slater as Clarence Worley is such a pitch-perfect casting choice that now, whenever I think of Christian Slater, I don't think Heathers. I think True Romance. He chews this dialogue, savoring every word from his pickup recitals to his confrontation with Drexel. Christian Slater understood the goddamn assignment. Clarence is basically a lovable loser. He works in a comic shop, he likes watching kung fu movies, he idolizes Elvis, he doesn't have the best of luck with women. Apparently his home life was really troubled. He's very headstrong. He's the sort of person where once he sets his mind to something, you cannot convince him out of it. Some people don't like this casting choice because they think Christian Slater is creepy. I can see why people say that, however, something to remember is the character is not all there. He talks to Elvis. He's basically psychotic by leaving to kill Drexel. I 100% don't attribute these traits as inherently Christian Slater's. I just think he's a damn fine actor. All of these traits lay some very fertile ground for an anti-hero. Instead, we get the perspective of an underdog. He's already scored big with the love of his life and he's attempting to score big again so he can reach this happily ever after. Quentin Tarantino has stated that Clarence is the most self-insert character he's ever written, and that mainly comes into play with Clarence's background. A movie guy with an absent father who isn't particularly smooth with the ladies. I think those few character traits are the ground level of what Quentin started with, but the character really developed into something different. This self-insert really works for me because Clarence is fallible. He can be determined and strong-willed to a degree that puts himself and Alabama in harm's way. He's sorta naive and clumsy, like forgetting his driver's license in Drexel's hand after he killed him. He has dialogue with a figment of his imagination. He gets his dad killed. But nonetheless, I really cared about him and his well-being throughout the story. I feel that likability really shines through in the billboard scene where he has a very what do I have to lose kind of attitude about him. It immediately drew me into this character. I know many men who would either lash out or react very insecurely to hearing that the best date of your life was a call girl sent by your boss, but not Clarence. All that matters to him in this moment is that she says she loves him and he doesn't want her to be lying because he loves her back. Patricia Arquette as Alabama is just, yeah, wow. She's definitely the least characterized out of the two, but she's still an interesting character nonetheless. She's a very ditzy, bubbly woman who comes across as very insecure about her role as a person by correcting Clarence that she's a call girl, not a whore, to mentioning that she's not what they call in Tallahassee, Florida, white trash nor damaged goods. She then reaffirms that she's capable of great love just as he is, even if it is on the first date. I figured now is a good time to talk about this. I don't blame people for not buying into the love at first date cliche. I don't blame them because I didn't when I first started watching it. Honestly, I was waiting for Alabama to betray Clarence because it was so on the nose. It had to be too good to be true. However, the script asks you to trust it with this decision and justifies that choice again and again by reinforcing how much the two actually do love each other. They defend and protect each other time and time again. They really are just a couple of crazy kids who can't keep their hands off each other whilst trying to achieve their happily ever after. Michael Rappaport's character is named Dick Ritchie. Dick's just a good guy. The second Clarence says something over the phone, he jumps up with enthusiasm over hearing his friend again. He tries to help him out when he needs it, but not afraid to tell him how out of his league he is and why. He's sort of the shining example of what you'd want a friend to be. If only I knew what he was going to tell Clarence. I guess that's supposed to be an example of how some things get left unsaid, but sure. Gary Oldman as Drexel. I'll just let him speak for himself.
I said, well, look, forget about that. Who's the character? And he said, well, he's a pimp, and he's a white guy who thinks he's black. And I said, okay, I'll do it.
Gary Oldman is so fucking good as Drexel. In fact, that's how a lot of the side characters are. Their job is to steal the scene away from our main characters, but not in a way that minimizes them. The movie just puts these new characters, these new personalities into the mix, and we see how it unfolds. Drexel is Clarence's first boss battle. He's Alabama's pimp. He is a bad motherfucker, a loose cannon, and a degenerate. You don't feel bad when Clarence blows him away. You are alleviated that the character is gone, but disappointed realizing this is the last of Gary Oldman you're going to see in this movie. Like I mentioned before, a lot of the side characters are not on screen for very long. Brad Pitt plays the stoner couch potato of Stoner Couch Potatoes. Val Kilmer plays the ghost of Elvis. And Samuel L. Jackson is in this movie for maybe a minute. He's barely even worth mentioning considering how little he's in the movie, but all he does is talk about eating ass and pussy and then gets shot. I have nothing more to say about that. That's just fucking awesome to watch considering what the actor will accomplish in the next 30 years. James Gandolfini plays a hitman who works for Christopher Walken's character, and it's almost a prelude to his role as Tony Soprano. He's very cold, he's very menacing, but he's also not a silent warrior. Like, he has absolutely no problem just shooting the shit with Alabama while she's bleeding on the ground. His dialogue with her is pretty decent character development as well for a side character. His almost playful yet threatening nature to explaining how someone becomes like him, starting from the bottom, getting sick from his first kill to now just doing it to see the expression change. He almost describes killing as a drug that he can't stop taking. It's not breaking any new ground in regards to character perspectives, but it's more than they could have done for a hitman character. Chris Penn and Tom Sizemore play the cops who end up going after Clarence and Lee Donowitz, and they're quite the duo. They're not the most morally conscious cops, caring only about getting credit for the sting, but also being more than willing and even at times getting satisfaction out of Elliot's misfortune. The portrayal of cops in this movie is pretty negative, but they are given moments that set them apart from a strict stereotype. Also, Tom Sizemore is coked out of his mind in his scenes. Oh, look at this man. He is sweating, he is yelling. What a delight. Dennis Hopper plays Clarence's dad, Cliff. Clarence goes to him to ask for a favor, and Cliff is thrown off by this. They haven't seen each other in a while. He's trying to be sober. He's living in some dump by the railroad tracks. He and Clarence are not on the best of terms, but they're also not on the worst either. He reluctantly accepts Alabama as Clarence's wife, and they leave on better terms than when they met. However, it is near impossible to talk about this character without talking about Christopher Walken's. Don't worry, we'll get into the Sicilian scene soon enough.
You're a cantaloupe.
I just want to talk about Christopher Walken's character first. Christopher Walken was an absolute unit when it came to acting, especially in the early 90s. He just elevates the dialogue to make it go from stale to fresh.
From growing up with him, I learned the pantomime. There are 17 different things a guy can do when he lies to give himself away. Guy's got 17 pantomimes.
He hardly has a character in this aside from being an Italian Don. He's aggressive with his questions and punishments, keeping a caged beast in him that's trying to get out while also remaining calm and collected, never shouting or raising his voice like some characters. I love the brief admiration he gives Cliff in this scene. It's such a small thing, but it's a sign of respect for making him so absolutely livid. Doesn't even enter the anger zone anymore. He just goes straight for the gun and says,
I haven't killed anybody since 1984.
Fuck it, we're gonna get into some of the best moments of this movie. And so, with that being said, the Sicilian scene. Absolutely fantastic. Everything about this scene is phenomenal, from the lighting, the dialogue, the atmosphere, the performances, the tension building. Good God, this is a scene that couldn't be made today for obvious reasons.
Sicilians were spawned by Nick.
Seriously guys, this movie has some ironclad balls at times. It oozes testosterone and humanity from its characters. The way the flower duet begins playing when Dennis Hopper asks for the Chesterfield is not only good timing, but meaningful on a narrative level. He knows he's going to die one way or another, so he accepts his fate and decides to say some of the most outlandish shit you can possibly say to an Italian Don. All that just to piss him off enough to kill him rather than live for the torture. I also really like the setup and payoff with the pantomime. I think it connects the first half of the scene with the last half very well. If I have to scrape the bottom of the barrel for something to criticize, there's some punching sound effects I've heard before, and maybe you can argue Christopher Walken's character should have been smart and experienced enough to recognize that Dennis Hopper's character is goading him into killing him, but it's not like it's out of character for him to do this. If I'm being honest, all of that is so minuscule as compared to how much we learn about these two characters, as well as the masterclass of tension building. The atmosphere is so smoky you can cut it with a knife. The dialogue is so crisp and it elevates the material way past the point it should be. This entire scene is a four-man symphony between Quentin Tarantino, Tony Scott, Christopher Walken, and Dennis Hopper played to its peak potential. So many takes, camera angles, the fact that the actors had to memorize all of their lines before each take. Absolutely incredible. Since we just talked about the Sicilian scene, I figured I should touch on my favorite and might be one of the more underrated moments from the movie. Clarence's confrontation with Drexel. It's not because Gary Oldman is being snubbed for an Oscar in this scene or anything, but because of what we're being told about these characters. Drexel calls Clarence out for saying he already has Clarence figured out. This is a good bit of development because it says Drexel knows how to read a room. He knows what to look for when it comes to trouble. A good trait to have if you're gonna be involved with Blue Lou Boyle. Clarence is kind of a Chad in this scene. He offers Drexel an envelope, he calls it payoff money, and when Drexel opens it, there's nothing there. I can only imagine what was going through Clarence's head before he went in was, what's the most badass thing I can do? Likely thinking back to all the movies he's seen or the comics he's read. Those small character traits are not just decoration, they're used well in regards to how our protagonist goes about this confrontation. I've already talked about how well this movie utilizes tension building, but this is another solid example. The music in the back is super fucking loud, super repetitive, and super intentional.
I know I'm pretty, but I ain't as pretty as a couple of titties.
It sets the tone for the chaos to erupt. It's kind of like walking into a concert in the middle of a song, but you're waiting for that next drop or breakdown to hit, for the tension to release. Same with this scene. The tension is already high, these characters aren't yelling at each other but talking loud enough to be unsettling. Right up to the very second when...
I'm just trying to lend a girl a helping hand.
It releases. I fucking love how jacked up Clarence looks in this shot. He knows Drexel isn't gonna take this news lightly and he knows he's more than likely gonna have to fight his way out. So, Alabama takes an absolute beating in this film. She's not portrayed to be a fighter, so her fighting a man twice her size is going to cause some disastrous harm. This, much like the Sicilian scene, is a scene that couldn't be made today because she is absolutely catching that fade. It's honestly a hard scene to watch at times, but all of that unsettledness pays off when she finally gains the upper hand against him, making it out alive. Like, that's such a satisfying win, holy shit. It almost had me screaming to the sky with her when she finally overcomes. Take notes, Hollywood. Maybe I'm psychotic, but I consider this one of the most romantic moments of the film, much how Alabama sees this as an act of romance on Clarence's part. Some of you smooth brains out there will say, "What? How do you find this romantic? She's getting beat up." Well, yeah. If you don't have the context for the scene, all you're going to see is a guy beating on a woman. But if you were watching the film and were waiting for that moment where Alabama could betray Clarence, this would be it. And she chooses not to. She is undoubtedly proving her love to Clarence by facing death for him and refusing to give him up. This isn't something Clarence wants either, he's just out getting burgers, but when shit hits the fan, Alabama meant it when she said,
"But I think I love you."
The Mexican standoff at the end is just fucking excellent. So many different players, from the cops, the mob, Lee Donowitz and his bodyguards, Clarence and Alabama, like, it's just fucking chaos. Narratively, it's really strong because we followed all of these groups to this endpoint, never losing track of who's who, who's where, and why. Like, all of these moving parts are part of the story. They don't just come in and then leave. I don't know Tony Scott's style of directing very well. He's a director I definitely have to do the deep dive with at some point, but he was kind of insane. According to the commentary, he threw it back to the old school style of filmmaking where directors would just endanger people to get the shot they needed. Like, this guy would slap Patricia Arquette in order to get her in that state of mind. They even called his right the Persuader. He told Christian Slater to drive into the middle of traffic on Sunset Boulevard. Absolute psychopath in the most interesting way. Hans Zimmer's score is pretty great. His major highlight on this film though is definitely the main theme. Such a catchy yet simple melody combined with the choice to use the steel drum as the primary instrument makes it a very unexpected yet flavorful track. It's definitely an earworm. Once I begin listening to it, that's my song for the day. That's how it works. His other song on the soundtrack, Stars at Dawn, is a solid track as well, being used to help build tension for Clarence's confrontation with Drexel. Before we get that absolute barrage of the senses techno music. This movie has built up enough good faith with its plot development that I can allow some things to fly, like Clarence being shot in the eye and surviving, or Alabama and Clarence not being stopped at all by the police on their way out of the Beverly Ambassador Hotel. However, this is a bit more believable considering there's a hostage situation going on and that's likely attracting all the cops. And look, I just gotta cover my bases here, but even though I can excuse these hiccups, the movie is not perfect. As mentioned before, whether or not you can buy the suddenness of our main character's true love is up to you. and I don't blame you if you can't buy it. All I can say is the movie works its hardest to try and make you believe it all the way to the end. Why did Drexel kill these guys? I know this scene is so we can understand Drexel as a dangerous loose cannon, and before I continue, I'm gonna throw this up on the screen, but why would the Italian mob hire a dangerous loose cannon? That's not to say that it can't happen. I mean, Tommy DeVito was part of the mob in Goodfellas as well, but still, it just doesn't seem like a smart decision. This scene is pretty cringe still. We hear the police sirens as Clarence and Alabama flee the hotel, but the police aren't anywhere near the hotel when he pulls out. Again, this is just really contrived that they're not as close as they seem to be. Clarence should have absolutely heard the screaming while he's in the bathroom. Like, the only way he's not hearing everything is if he's at the other end of the hotel, which he isn't. Look, I don't know when the US and Mexican border started getting real strict about who goes in and out, so this may be a flaw, may not be, but I don't think the border patrol is gonna let you guys across the border when Clarence has a bloody eye wrap. Like, that reeks of trouble. Shawshank also has this dilemma where a parolee can just cross the border willy-nilly. Like I said though, maybe I'm just a dumb stupid head, and if so, please feel free to comment below where this notion of crossing the borders with no issues came from. I'd really like to know. I think it's an odd choice to have Alabama deliver the narration considering she isn't the most fleshed out character, but it can make sense considering Tarantino's original script. In his original script ending, Clarence died, and the movie ends with Alabama stealing the money and hitching a ride to Mexico whilst dragging Clarence's name. No, yeah, she's calling him an asshole. With the magic of editing, this ending is communicating to us that Alabama does still love Clarence, however, it's very petty. She's essentially taking part in the bitterness we all do when we break up by simply calling the other person an asshole, trying to hide our true feelings on the matter. I think this ending attracts viewers because it doesn't conform to the Hollywood happy ending people think the original movie has, but I disagree. If Tarantino directed this movie with his script, it very well could have worked. However, with Tony Scott's romanticism and how he chose to portray the intimate moments between these two, this ending just saps the fairy tale aspect out of the story. Very aggressively, I might add, which is what I think elevates this movie above your average love and crime caper. This is considered the realistic ending, but I also think this could be as well. This movie takes the best of Tony Scott and the best of Quentin Tarantino and uses them to its full advantage. In the booklet I got for this movie, Tony Scott mentions this is the best script he has ever worked with, and I haven't seen all of his movies, but my guy knocked it out of the park. This is a movie I watch almost every couple of months because of how invested I am in these crazy kids and the insanity that they go through. It's dangerous, thrilling, and nuts at times, but you know, that's how love can be. True Romance is a movie that leaves you feeling better than you did when you went in. It's a movie that reminds you that whether you're a lovable loser that works in a comic shop, or a ditzy flirtatious call girl, we all deserve true romance. I fully recommend it.